podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justice Raji.
All right. So, first thing, all right. So this day I wanted to talk to you about, because we mentioned in passing like the Nas Jim Jones interaction, and I guess we couldn't say the Nas and Jim Jones interaction, the Jim Jones public statement, and then the cultural or the group discussion
the
of
brouhaha that he heard,
right, as it were. And then, and also, this year, the Wu-Tang Clan is doing the 30-year, I guess it's 30-year, which I guess they're calling it the final tour.
I guess it's just the last world tour, but
last world tour.
What's name came out in 93. So
yeah, so I'm trying to remember why they keep saying 30 years, but we won't figure that out right now. The point is, I went to see the Wu-Tang Clan at the time of this recording, would be last night. Here I made the decision, I ain't never seen the Wu-Tang Clan as a whole on a stage, and if this is the last time they doing it, I'm gonna go and check it out. You know what I mean? My daughter volunteered herself onto the experience, which was a good time, and our good brother, our brother Knowledge attended with us, so we had a wang dang doodle. Also some other people I know, oddly enough, ended up sitting next to like two or three other black folks that I know just by chance, stuff happens at concerts. And it got me thinking of a couple things just about hip hop and music. And I know we're a couple days late for Black Music Month, but we can talk about whatever we want to talk about whenever we want to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? We are not constrained by the clock or the calendar. You know what I mean? For the rest of y'all, if you don't know nothing about that, you can learn about it, you know what I'm saying, at some point. But so with that, there's a couple of things I wanted to share, just a little bit about the experience, a snapshot. And even a peer of ours has shared a post, sort of like their reaction going when they were out in Pittsburgh, or Atlanta, maybe. I don't actually know where he saw them at. Wherever he saw them at was like, yeah, they are men of an advanced age, and as folks who we would say are, I think, most of them are a couple of years older than us, but they're still more our age range, and it was, as I said to you earlier, like when you think about, if you think about you going out, for those of y'all that never performed on a stage, there's no kind of music or nothing, and there's a way you would be when you was 21 or 22, when you was get up there to do your hip hop, and if you still do that same song, but you do it now at 49, it might look a little different. You know what I mean? The words is the same
in the morning,
and you feel different in the morning. So it was cool. First of all, I was overall, if you like Wu-Tang, it's the show. It's fun. It's lights. Run the Jewels opens up for him, which if you like me and you like Run the Jewels, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm into all that, And then but it was interesting also to, the one, like, very instant things, like they acknowledge it even within the structure of the show. They also understand that a lot of their fans that are there are also their age, like people that have been into the Wu for years. And there's some younger people, and there's also people that, like, we was there, for me in like 1991 when the first time I heard some Wu-Tang. You know what I'm saying?
What was that station that y'all had in Princeton? It was
PRB.
PRB.
Yeah.
Just a really quick interjection. That's a radio station that doesn't get enough credit. If for Wu-Tang alone, if you just said they were important in the world for Wu-Tang, because I remember, we couldn't get WPRB really that well, right? Like, depending on where your radio was in your house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? In the weather. But like we would like listen, you know what I'm saying? And I remember WPRB having them before even WKDU and WKCR in New York. So no, you know, and that, I mean, that's a whole nother waterfall of the role of college radio.
Yeah.
And taste making and learning about things, you know, for another time. But yeah.
I shared a bit of that with my daughter, like, you know, there was this thing, right, where a lot of the music that we listen to, and because of how kids listen to music these days, it may seem like, what you mean I can't listen to the music I want to, like, there's no, like, yo, if they ain't played on the main station, you had to get music off of a tape or somebody giving it to you, you know, mixtapes and stuff. And even mixtapes were still developing, so we really like somebody had a tape or something they recorded from somewhere else or some other means, and then they were sharing it. You know what I'm saying? And then the college radio stations started playing music that we couldn't hear, right? If you had a good record store in your area, shout out to Turntable, you know what I'm saying, in Willingboro, Jay Ski and them, like you know, and they might play stuff for you in the store, right? But otherwise, you might be like, yo, I never heard of this. And like real word of mouth shit was a way that music got around. And so for Wu-Tang, I had the two prongs. The first was PRB, and then my brother, you know, started going to Morgan. And they, you know, for whatever reason they was around Baltimore. That's somebody else's discussion. But right, if folks that went to Morgan at that time had early access because they was, you know, just connecting, you know, with the college crowd there, right. And then you know there was the Method Man, and I think Protect Your Neck was on the single.
It was,
yeah. And and you know the rest is, you know, is golden age, golden history of hip hop. But like, yeah, it was, you know, it was just some funny moments. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, you watch a band that's clearly, you know, 55, 56-ish, kind of shuffle, scoot out on stage in a way that they try to be mellow, but also it's like, yeah, you the same age as me, brother. You look like you look you look like you just got out of class, and you know what I'm saying? You like, I thought I was warmer than I am, and let me slide out here so I can get in position. And I, you know, just I had a little giggle. Then it was like, man, go ahead and, you know, bust them rhymes, brother. It's like, I appreciate it. So, and I guess there's a couple other, I guess some other footnotes of the actual, you know, I'll save some of those for later, just because I want to get to the interesting thing is, and I'll start off maybe our conversation saying this. I hear a lot, and folks will do this, like, hip hop is a young people's whatever. It's a young people's vehicle. I don't know if I totally accept that idea. Only because like maybe now it is, but you know, folks who are a couple years older than us have a different orientation to some certain artists that are a couple years older than us, right? So they have a different relationship with like the Houdinis, Run DMC, of the world. Then a couple people a little bit older than them have a different relationship with the Curtis Blows, you know, the Grandmaster Flashes, the everybody of the like pre-hip hop really being on records or early hip hop being on records era. And then folks have a different orientation younger than us, right? Like a little bit younger, and then obviously like if you under 20 right now, you got a wholly different idea about hip hop. Or rap or whatever. I don't even know how they would reference it. But my challenge with the idea that the music is only a youth thing is like, I mean, when we was listening to some of these songs, and not to say that there's some stuff in music that I listen to that have not outgrown or at least feel differently, but it was like, you know, I still feel like they started out with bring the ruckus, and I largely feel like Bring the Ruckus about most of my life. I just, you know, maybe filter it different ways.
Yeah, you do.
Right?
Variety of ways. Bring
like I have not substantially changed in terms of my perspective of why. So, you know, before we get into, I guess I would like to, like, what is your thought like on that idea? Because I think it's relevant to the Nas Jim Jones thing. Because Jim Jones is sort of assertion was one, I got some stuff that's good too, which is a thing, but also like I've influenced this other generation and whoop-de-woo and Nas, and I've seen, I think it was a young brother on somebody's podcast kind of like talking about belts and all this other type of stuff. I'm like, what the hell that got to do with the way them words go together? But yeah, so there I will make a bounce pass and ask you, what's some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, so I was actually the opposite. There was a place in my life where I thought absolutely hip hop was a young person's game, right? And I thought that because of the role of like Black youth culture,
mm-hmm.
and just given how fast Black youth culture moves,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And how fast you can get out of Black youth culture. At a certain point, I was thinking, through that. And then I stopped thinking that. And I stopped thinking that for some largely bad reasons. Because I started thinking about how we're all still kind of, it's not infantilizing. I don't want to go that far.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me realize how a lot, again, you heard of music when you were 12 or 15 or 18 or 21, and you're still repeating some of that music, which was like youth culture ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're part of stuff that our brains weren't fully developed, and many of us found ourselves in situations and conditions that were less than savory, created by, policy and structural racism, right? And so we're expressing ourselves in certain ways. And then when you get to the place in it where sometimes you're expressing what you see around you, but then sometimes what you see around you and the way you express it sells records. So at that point, it stops being about how authentic it was, even if it was authentic, and starts being about what can I sell, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a young person's game anymore. And I think that has its own challenges. I think, many of our other classic musics, for a variety of reasons, you could listen to it later and it made sense. And don't get me wrong. Should you run around calling a woman a brick house like the Osley brothers? Probably not.
But I thought that sex,
right?
The winning hand.
Yeah, like you know what I'm saying. So I'm not. This is not like everything that happened in the 60s and 70s was great, and the 80s started just like death culture.
Yeah.
So that's not where I'm at. But I am at a place where it's like, okay, how much of when these artists are growing up with us, but they're still having to sell music to younger people, did older people become kind of contained in that?
Mm-hmm.
So at certain points, I did think that.
Yeah.
Well,
and I guess I guess my thought on it is almost like it's like a both and, right? Because like yes, in the conversation of like popular attention and structure and like who's the hardest artist, you know what I mean, right? Yes, it is. There is at least a component of your current relevancy to the moment, right? And are you a mover and a shaker? Are you got the juice, as we've said sometimes, right? About something. And then there's a part of me that also goes, like, is that a separate thing from, is the music, like, does the music have relevancy to somebody? Right.
Right.
And then even the thing of the aspect of looking at any music that's created as a form of art, as what music has become, at least in our, in the last 60, 70 years since the recording of music is a thing that was relatively widely accessible, at least even in parts of the world where people don't have lots of electronics or equipment, being able to be broadcast on radio, being able to be played and shared, at least pretty widely, that a really great musical creation sometimes still like will have a energy of its own, a value of its own, right? That person can tap into, being separate from sort of. I mean, I could do a capitalist analysis, except from its ability to be a commodity for the for the transmit of products. But it's like, so if like, and I think it bears on the Nas Jim Jones conversation, because like the immediate, at least to me, subtext reaction when somebody's like, oh yeah, like for someone to go like Nas and Jim Jones, I go, Nas may have created one of the greatest albums of hip hop history, let alone music history ever. And Jim Jones has some great hits that are good, but nothing that no album that I would put in the grouping. We started going like, man, there's like a record that is a tour de force of creative expression by an artist. It's like even across genres, where you would go, you would go Nas, you would go Paid in Full, you would go Takes Nation Millions to Hold Us Back. You start stacking these up. You go Death Certificate, you go like the first Juvenile joint. You go like you start going to these albums that not just were they hits or did they sell, that even just as a connoisseur person that enjoys music, and depending on the expanse of music that you can connect to, you would start going, yeah, I don't think none of them Jim Jones full albums touch that. And it's not a negative on Jim Jones. It's like, nah, that stuff you did, like Summer in Miami, it's still a great song. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. You know what I mean? But the comparison is about this like bigger thing, and notwithstanding Nas's overall body of work to kind of like always be rapping, and then even at least like I said to me, these last 3 albums were Hit Boy, like some of that stuff where you're doing a different thing, but it's kind of like the old thing, but it's like a new thing, like it's relevant to now, and
right.
So
one thing I can say, I think to your point, it's like music versus culture. And that's what I was actually saying with my point about hip hop being a young person's game and not a old people's game and whatever have you. I was thinking about Black youth culture pushing hip hop. Mm-hmm. At this point, Black youth culture is not the main determinant of hip hop. There's a whole host of other things. Yeah. It might find its way into Black youth, but it's not Black youth culture. And I think, that's a conversation for another day about the bastardization of the word, the culture, which is being used as an anvil by Black people. Since I guess I got used to saying incendiary shit on here. But like, so I think in the sense of like Nas and Jim Jones, I think you get to this music versus culture conversation. So I want to come at this kind of 2 ways. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about music, there's no comparison, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whether from the role of Illmatic, it was written when you go back and listen. Oh, yeah. Quality album. It just got overshadowed by Big and Jay-Z and Wu-Tang and now trying to find his way. And then what I'll call that's his first kind of era. Then Nas had this second era. I would say Stillmatic to like the I Am, not I Am, but the album when he got he had beat on the back. I think it was called Nigga or something, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's a particular part of his canon, the stuff he did with Damian Marley. So I think then he was a little more, he had some high highs and some meh. Yeah. And then I think his last 15 years, frankly, has been his third canon, which has been like this, like I'm a grown up out like records. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I'm making grown up hip hop. I'm making hip hop for people who go to work every day. Right? Like I'm not making youth culture music. Mm-hmm. So music wise, we can have that conversation all day. Which one is good? This and the third. It is probably true that it hasn't had the impact of culture on hip hop broadly in a while. Because again, even when we're comparing them, we always go, "Oh, Illmatic, dog." You know what I'm saying? Like, the world, dog. It made me hate me now.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
And then implicit ether, right? Yeah. So there's also the implicit ether kind of thing. Again, culturally, you can debate. Now, on the flip side, you have two, depending on who you are, how much you're into hip hop, and how much you stay connected to, like, frankly, very East Coast hip hop, you have a range of songs that you remember from Jim Jones. If you're thinking about culture, Jim Jones has been deeply influencing hip hop culture for the last 20 years, 25, frankly.
Yeah.
And he's not incorrect.
Right.
Again, you might say Summer in Miami, you might say Pop Champagne, you might say Ballin',
Yeah.
But what is actually more impressive is Max B, is Stack Bundles, right? Like those kind of impacts, the street impact of the diplomat culture.
Yeah. Like in that like post 9/11.
Yeah,
New York City
that tsunami
energy, the tsunami, the way that world kind of like shaped out.
Yeah, like that New York blood culture, let's call it what it is, New York gang culture, that morphing of New York gang culture and what it created as a hybrid identity for New York City, that then in many ways influenced much of the East Coast. Because at that point, you was doing the diplomats thing, and then part of that was Blood and Crippin'.
Yeah.
And the only other thing was kind of G-Unit, 50 kind of had his own, like, I'm not Blood or Crip, but we have our own kind of like...
Yeah, our own kind of...
criminal movement happening. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, we have our own sort of crime influence or connected thing, while also, and I would say interesting in a structural comparison, like to where hip hop of that type would have been like when we were late teens, early 20s, in 90s, like, because like the G-Unit thing is kind of like totally kind of like mainstream when it's happening, right? It's not a like underground or like you can't hear it on the radio thing, which is at least, someone listening can correct me that I'm wrong on that. Like once 50 became 50, he was a mainstream artist who rapped about like
what we know of 50,
gangsters, right? He was no longer
that what you know of 50 Cent, unless again you were like deeply into New York mixtape culture and specifically mixtape as album culture, right? Taking other people's beats and then using them to be able to create your own buzz to the point where you can go record and do shows and do your thing.
And I think if you think about that too, within the like what was happening with like the Gucci Mane, like that whole world, like Gucci Mane got 7 million mixtape records, right? But that structure was like all of that. I mean, I guess Gucci Mane maybe wasn't like necessarily mainstream, but he was popular. I guess it would be more like Lil Wayne.
The drama mixtapes. I think you can go transition from Clue to drama. Again, with these records are essentially albums, right? And 50 was kind of like the first one to do it, and the Diplomats came kind of right after that with their own kind of like world. So he's not incorrect. There's a whole host of people who have been dressing like Jim Jones for a long time, whether they told you that or not.
Right.
It's a whole bunch of people throwing up bees and, with no understanding of the, how shall we say, complexities of New York City, blood culture and gang culture. Yeah. And it's hybrid nature of a sorts.
Yeah.
And so I just think like, and so then you get all the way to now where you call him the oldest YN. He's the YN at the end of the video game. Like if you got through all the video game, you were trying to vanquish ignorance. Like you would get Jim Jones at the end with a do-rag on. And like, talking about no matter what I say, I got to get paid. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like he revels in it, right? And so I do think at some point, part of this debate is this whole music and culture conversation. And depending on your context, if you're into the classic context of our music, you're always going to go all the way to Nas, right? They say the day Suge Knight was in jail, like, yo, Jim Jones, you tripping, right? Like, so
right.
somebody is somebody as wild as Suge Knight,
right?
Who fundamentally, even with whatever we say, was a really important arbiter of creating a framework of classic hip hop and just classic music with Death Row, right? Like sometimes we try to let the shit that they did mess with who, what my man saying, Butterfrum, never forget who we are, Shep. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Who we are, Shep. That's right.
But so I'm just saying, and I pass it to add on. But yeah, I think it is a fundamental music versus culture conversation. And Jim Jones has to remain relevant in the context of being viral. And he has to remain in that kind of way that Nas at this point does not. Nas has gotten to this kind of meta place in music, which is not many rappers have gotten to. I think you could say Jay. I think in some his own way, you could probably say Andre 3000, but for a variety of different reasons. He's gotten to a meta level. He does a flute album. He shows up in overalls, performing in front of, gangsta ass clubs in Atlanta, and people clap. Like, it's a meta. Like, his role is beyond that conversation. Jim Jones, I think, understands his role is still deep and intentionally within the like, I have to remain relevant by creating attention culture. And this is what, you and I built on a lot. It's just the role of attention culture and how that plays into the culture, which is why he would assert it. You know what I mean?
And that raises something, I guess, too, like that I have to be mindful of, right? And even from a perspective of doing something creative, that I may be wanting to do something creative because I think it's interesting and cool or says a thing, and as opposed to like I'm trying to make a moment and get some attention, like I'm trying to get some eyes, or at least I would say always the creative tension that I think about is if you are creating something and you want people to see it, don't lie to yourself that you don't want attention, right?
That's right.
Also, maybe don't do something just because you're going to get attention, right? Like that energy, right? I think was always the curveball or at the middle of that that artificial in some ways discussion of our younger time making music, where it's like you're gonna do commercial hip hop and you're gonna do like real shit. You're gonna do the consciousness and the whatever, and this like tacit assumption that if it is too much of one thing, you can no longer do it because people won't be interested, or you can't simultaneously be popular and maybe be talking about or sharing something that we have framed as unpopular to be right. Like a pop, like in the mainstream conversation, which always I think is fraught for Black folks if you think of the mainstream as the like largest. If the mainstream is composed of those who buy the most or have the most buying power, and which means most often at some point, which even at the show I was at last night, a lot of white folks. Shout out to Method Man for saying I won't reveal it just because y'all wasn't there, but I'll tell you basically Method Man they did shame on her, and Method Man made sure he let people know who should be saying the N-word part, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were singing along the whole way, you know what I'm saying? You might want to check yourself before you wreck yourself, despite, the vast composition it's Portland, of the crowd, right? And these sort of aspects of, because even if you would have told me in 1993 that the Wu-Tang would become a main, like that main of America would be into the Wu-Tang, I'm like, I don't think y'all like the Wu-Tang for the reason that I like the Wu-Tang. Or I don't know if we like this for the same reason, but we can both be having an experience with a piece of creativity that may be divergent, right? You may be into the lyrics and the content, but I doubt you feel it the way I feel it, right? You know, or and I can, go deeper on that. And that also speaks to because even someone like Jim Jones, I be thinking, and the Diplomats as a whole, I'm like, so did they like all like that extra wild stuff the Diplomats was doing, like in the main, like in the larger, like was they into that part? Or were they into like some other part, right? Like it sounded at the club, or it looked a certain way in the places I was going, or the DJs in the bottle popping age of that time was playing it, so we enjoyed it within that context, right? Not so much like, I don't know if all folks listen to music while cleaning the crib or making.
No, I think that's a very specific element of a time of Black people, and I think that Gen Xers, we assume that there's like house cleaning music. Yeah. And I don't, and even if there is house cleaning music, we assume there is a kind of house cleaning music. House cleaning music. And generationally, that changes.
They don't do that.
He be cleaning this room. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, whether it's R2D2, 4, 5, 6 Gangsta Boogie, right? Like, these guys, they got these names, they're super long now, right? Like, or if he's listening to like a rock album, I'm like, are you cleaning to that? Like our generation got okay with rock music. Well, one, because we ain't had no choices. We had a Friday night video generation.
You had to listen to it,
right? We were the last generation who did not have a choice to listen to white music, and I think we downplay that.
Yeah,
like we were the last ones where you were going to listen to white music.
Yeah.
You like Depeche Mode, or what I'm saying, like Phil Collins, or insert ABBA, or Aha, whatever.
Let me get a shout out to Selector because he was doing a day on his Twitch. He did Everybody Rules the World, Tears for Fears joint, and then he did versions. He did like 5, 6 different versions. That was like like Robert Glasper version. It was what's the name and what's the name? It was like a house joint. It was like all these. I was like, this is dope. It was like, I think it was like a Bilal joint or something. Maybe it was Bilal Selector. If you listen to this Selector, you know what I'm saying. You feel free to correct the brother. Right. One love the Selector. We love him. It was like we like Tears for Fears. We love that song. That's the jam. We like some other song. They got that other song. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
We like British. We like the British. We like the '80s element of the British invasion because largely it was their response to soul music, right? But yeah, we like it. We're the last generation who had that particular thing around white music. I think successive generations of Black people have a different orientation to white music. Right. And now I'm not going to put all of us, we all didn't live in the ghetto. We all did. But I'm just saying successive orientations of us are taking in music differently than how we did in regard to like that music. And I wanted to say that as a piece to go to back something that you said, God, was really insightful. When you're listening to people quote Wu-Tang and they don't know what they're saying, especially between 93 and 97, when they're rapping, like they have no idea, or Supreme Clientele. And then I think about Pink Floyd, right? And how I'll listen to some Pink Floyd songs, like, and I think like you're supposed to get high to it, even if you ain't getting high, like you should probably get high, right?
Right.
And it's timeless. And so I don't really know what they're talking about, right? But the music grabs me. And I think that Wu-Tang, more than any group from that era, because Biggie died and Pac died, right? So we can never have the conversation of how their music would have been received 30 years, 20, 30 years later, right?
And that's important.
Right. So Wu-Tang is the thing that got to that meta place that, for a broader population that I think is different with them. And so that's why I think the Jim Jones and Nas thing, I think the dialogue is really about us resetting what we're talking about. And when we say hip hop now, what exactly are we saying and what is it driven by? Mm-hmm. Because it's like when Jim said, yo, check my stats. Who got more number one records? And it's like, of course, Nas has more number one.
Yeah, records. He got more records.
Because he put out records at a time where his album would go number one as soon as it came out. It was Nas.
Right.
There was major label promotion putting that album everywhere. They were buying records and never selling them. So, of course, he's going to go number one every time. But I do think what we miss is, and what I think some older hip-hop fans and even older hip-hop artists can downplay is that, if you wear one of them shiny belts, if you want to dress like a rock star, quote unquote, mm-hmm. If you were doing some of that, if you're throwing up beads for no apparent reason, like on the East Coast at least, it's probably due to Jim Jones / diplomats / like New York street culture.
Right. And I think there's a maybe one of our sociologists, academics could do some work on like the way LA, as I would say, LA styled like gang affiliation and the permutations of that, like because what you have in New York and North Jersey, we should say North Jersey, the metro area. Absolutely. And then the like, I don't know if we would call it a resurgence, but like the drill music coming out, like the how gang culture, street organization culture moved into what was the gangster, we would call gangster rap music. And when we were younger, they would call it that, but sort of just like hip hop, like it was just kind of all the hip, like if it was ever a real thing that there was like conscious hip hop and gangster hip hop, if that was ever real, right? By the time you get like the last 15 years, it was like there's hip hop, and then there's like very maybe more regional sounds, or there's but there is a street culture, gang culture, whatever you say, orientation that was not filtered through affiliation structures in a way that was much more like the assumption was an affiliation in a way that was not the case when in our age, so to speak, here in the 90s.
I mean, just to add on to that, I think because I often reflect on why Chicago street culture, like Midwest, I'll just say broader, but those organizations that started in Chicago and proliferated throughout the Midwest, even though it was all across the country, like why did it not find itself into hip hop in the same ways? And one, I think, is ease of being apart. Mm-hmm. Like what you have to do to be, a Vice Lord or a Stone or a Gangster Disciple, and frankly, the rules around it. That also means someone can tell you what to say and what not to say.
Yeah.
Even think about early LA hip hop. Quick and 8 were really relatively kind of down low about their affiliation.
Yeah, they didn't necessarily.
Like you knew it, you could tell, but they were down low about their affiliations, right? Like that wasn't something they could project. You could probably argue Snoop was the first one that, kind of had like a broader, hey, this is my affiliation. By the time New York culture, New York gang culture starts to get on record in that way, because let's say if the Bloods hit and if the Crips come in like 91, 92, if the Bloods hit in 93, hence 9 Trey for everybody's listening. So when Jim Jones always talks about 9 Treys, because the Bloods got there in 93. But an actual Blood rapper and Crip rapper doesn't come out till like 2000.
Yeah.
Right? So there's still this time. And there's this, this time between when you can actually come out and be that thing. And I think what happened was it just broke down the rule. It broke down like, did you have to have any rules to do it? And that's why I think Chicago, the drill idea also proliferated, because at that point, the GDs and the BDs, it wasn't no structure. Like, the chiefs wasn't home, the chairmans wasn't home, like, so they had lost their structure. So when Chief Keef and Dirk and Fredo and all of them come out, they really represent like the deconstruction of Chicago street culture, right? They don't represent like do or die. They were clearly, I think vice lords or whatever, right? Yeah, but like, you don't know that if you don't have an eye for it. But by the time Dirk and them come out, we BDs, and this is we Black disciples. So I think, to your point, it's like when you had like organizations and they were treated differently than like the breakdown in the systems and breakdowns in the structures. And so this age thing, and I wanted to get your take on this, just it also shows itself in this rollout for the clips. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you have two rappers, Push's 48, 47, 48, and his brother Malice is 52. And so you have this like one of the best rollout for an album I've seen in years for an album of old men.
Yeah.
They talk about selling drugs. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm a Clips fan. I'm a Pusher fan. Like, so I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, but almost exclusively.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, you got to do a lot of, how to like say, transmutation to make it like, I'm just talking about being serious about my own personal work. I'm not excited about this song because I support the transport of illegal substances. It's just about attitude, how you approach life. You know what I'm saying? Gotta flip that thing. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's real. I will say that's real because, I was big into the Re-Up Gang when they were doing the stuff with Ab Lava and Sandman. And like, I found myself being attracted to it. And I think one, just being honest, I'm attracted to one because they were talking about street culture of a particular time. And having had access of bird's eye view, whatever you want to call it, because whatever nobody can get arrested for whatever I saw in 1991.
Right.
But like, you just saw an ethic. That's the best way to describe it. You saw an ethic. And even the way that they rapped reflected the ethic of that time. And it was like missing in the music.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I just, as I'm, listening to looking at the rollout, I see it connected to, again, Jim Jones, right? Because, they threw a shot at Jim. He threw a shot back. He wanted to go viral. They wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they do it at Louis Vuitton headquarters. Mm-hmm. He does one on Linux, on 112 and Linux with the mic in the joint. You know what I mean? Again, and he did a good song. But it was, again, he needed to take it culturally to do something different with it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this very transactional nature of the music. And it probably always has been. It probably just feels different for us now than it did.
Well, the thing I say, what you asked me, like, it's even if it's on like the Clips, like the Clips are a certain energy. For me, like how I orient to them is there's like an aggression. There's there's a lot of references to, doing various things that's related to, distribution of illegal substances. But also the ethic and the way you're oriented to the world due to that, an acknowledgement of the risk. You are involved in the criminal enterprise. And so if me and you have an issue related to this activity, there's no external arbiter. We have to be the one to hold the honor of the activity, right? Which, although is in the context of crime, probably not a good thing. In the context of other areas of, liberatory thought, you got to go, hey man, like if we and you are engaged in something where we trying to make something happen in the world, I can't go to the civil court if you do something that I think is I got to engage with you, right? So your ethic and who you are is important to us doing the thing we're doing. Yeah. And it's the thing that I think, has always been close to the bone on like why folks who may be engaged in, like I said, liberatory struggle and folks who may be engaged in other things sometimes find themselves in the same room, because you have an acknowledgement that some of whatever is the defining power structure is not actually effective for your protection or well-being, or you going to have to deal with this on some other terms, whatever they may be. And then also the music, I guess, like I said, can you snap your fingers to it to make you dance? You know what I'm saying? Is it fun? Do you enjoy it? I think that's still the world. Isn't like, man, all y'all like is the super duper triple gangster music. It's like, nah, I like all kinds of hip hop. There's other artists like we're not necessarily pulling into this Nas Jim Jones conversation, and even to the Nas aspect. Nas is not like this squeaky clean character of like moral clarity or something, right? The way we engage with music, and particularly the nature of hip hop, has a difference, because it's almost a different care. One, because I feel like our generation is in the bridge place of, like I said, when the hip hop went from just something that was maybe always better live when you went to go see it versus better when you heard it on a record and you was listening to it in the park or over here or riding with your peoples or going to a thing, or like even if you never got a chance to go to a live show of that artist, you listen to that a whole lot more than you would have listened to a Brucey B or you know what I'm saying, or the Cold Crush, like at their best, which might have been best seeing them live, and then fill in the blank of whoever artist from wherever you're at in the world that was like the number one person, or and then when you get into like the house and the bounce and all the different the crossover with the dance genres that are born out of the same era, again, that were a thing that were maybe a part of an experience in a way that was not a part of day-to-day life, where like hip hop albums and mixtapes and freestyle joints and all that stuff became a thing of itself that was an experience that you often had sitting at somebody's crib, maybe playing video games, maybe having a substance, drinking a beer or whatever, chilling. People, well, for whatever reason, you may have been outside on a block in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, that's right.
And, or a car came by, or y'all went over to get some food on the late night, and somebody had, they had their speakers bumping, and it was like sort of a party, but it sort of wasn't, but you was hanging out. Whatever, all them other aspects that are not the same as when hip hop again was like, I went to the Palladium, not even Palladium, like the so-and-so banquet center because somebody had a talent show, or, when it moved out of that space. And then was more like how someone engaged with, maybe not Journey or something, because that's like stadium rock. But I'm saying, like, I'm going to the concert.
No, everything you're saying is actually making me think of the wonder of how we found music.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the wonder of how we found music was attached to the culture at that time.
Yeah.
So like you said, the record store is a third place. Where sometimes I would go to the record store, I ain't had no money. I was trying to see if what I learned now to be the thing where they got free stuff from the record store. They got free stuff from the record labels and sold us the tape.
Yeah.
I remember I bought Redman shit, the Redman and Onyx sampler. That was supposed to be free. They charged me $5 for that shit, man.
Cold piece, man. There's no idea.
And they be talking to you like they did something for you. You be like, oh man, what's that? Oh, that's Redman. You never heard of Redman? No, man, I want that. What's that? Onyx? Yeah. You know what? For you, man, $5.
That's you, man.
Motherfucker, it was free.
You ain't had to pay for that.
You ain't had to pay for that, dog. But like the third space and the moment of wonder that you felt in the record store, that I felt in the record store, people all over the world felt in the record store, you don't know what you're going to hear. Mm-hmm. You don't know what record they're going to play at 1:00 at night. And if you're up, and once you get to say, if you're up at 1 with your homies, you're up at 1 in the house, and you jump up trying to tape that song.
Right. You gotta stay up like, yo, they're gonna play it.
It's game changing for you at that moment. Right? So again, the idea of culture around music has shifted. Because now it's not the wonder. It's going to be different, right? And that's not to make it better or worse, right? Like I'm not into that. Like in my day, is how it went. I'm sure people have their own understanding of wonder when they hear a song for the first time, and how it hits them. You know, I would actually say that Tim's, oh man, the song with Tim's, and I think it's DeVito or whatever, that like Afrobeat song, kind of Afrobeats, kind of not. You know, but like that song, when I first time I heard it, I was like, wait, what the hell is this? It doesn't sound like anything else I've heard, right? Like, so you still get that, but I think it's just different. And I do think we have a lot of people talking about music and culture, but haven't kind of attended to the reality of music and culture. And I think these issues about artists being good and bad and who's your top 5 and what records do this, like all those things have so much to do with this shifting of culture. And like, you know, current artists needing to remain really in your face unless they have a dedicated, deep following that they've been able to build. So it's very similar to what we're talking about. Like, we like to talk about this stuff. Shit, if I could be like Ghostface Killer, you never see me on nothing, that would be great. And you just hear my voice. Now I would prefer that, right? But I know people want to see people.
Yeah.
So we make that shift. And so how you build something organic to have a career and have this versus like, no, I have to be in your face to get exposure. I think it's just interesting. And last thing I'll say about that is like, even though I'm sure it wasn't planned, I think the coldest piece about what Nas, his response or lack of response was like, hey, I'm trying to get a casino in Queens. Now, again, there's a whole host of complexities of how you want to perceive that. But to hear nothing from Nas and then just to see him on a what's the name being like, yo, I'm bringing jobs to Queens.
Right. So I'm just, y'all talk about that. Yeah, like I'm not. Y'all stay over there with that.
Like I'm actually trying to get the city in New York State to put a casino in my neighborhood, right? And like again, you can say whole host of things about the role of casinos in cities and everything that comes with that. But at the same time, him framing, I'm trying to create opportunity for residents that were like me, and the other, right. The other conversation is like, I'm lit. I got action in the streets. Niggas, they love my people Simon Belts.
They love me.
Right? I'm out here. You know what I'm saying? I'm outside. Like, and so that was, in some ways, it also showed me the kind of conversation I go back to in the beginning when I was saying, like, hip hop being a young person's game of like, what game are we playing? Like, are we playing the game that you love your art and use as a leverage to do a whole host of other things, like I would say Nas and I think to some Jay-Z have done, right? Or like, listen, I have to make a career in music, so whatever I have to say to you, I have to say, which is where I feel like Jim Jones, his position.
Yeah, like I've established a pathway where I can do a thing, and I have to keep doing it. Yeah, I mean, and to the degree that any artist creates a nucleus, so to speak, of fans, right? And even within this attention culture, right? However you cultivate an audience of people that want to engage with the thing that you do, right? And you know, if I want to try to do the mental gymnastics to not be content, but then understanding, I guess that is content, but it's like, you know, this is you having access to my mind, you know what I'm saying? And the manifestation of the ultimate reality that is me, not just no content, but it's like, all right, I guess maybe there's also content. Maybe it's both.
Once it distills back down to the surface, God drops some water, one drops some ice. It's content. That's how it's perceived whether his degree.
Yeah, and that is like the tension, right? The energy, the thing that is as I always think about it, like whatever many a age ago, when the first, if there is such a thing, but the contingent of folks that realized being known in the next village over was some fly shit. Like they was just chilling, and it was like, yo, they know about me over there on the other side of the forest. You know what I'm saying? And the other people like, what you mean? You gonna know in a minute. You gonna know in a minute what it's about. They know me, and you know me in this village, and they know me in that village. You know what I'm saying? Two different villages know who I am, or what I'm about, or the way I do something.
Warrior style, or the way I was a farmer. They didn't heard about me. The griot took my name over there. They talk about me.
They talk about me right now, like 2 valleys over. You know what I'm saying? It's a whole other river valley. They know me, and so you know what I'm saying. And like we as humans, because there's like it's a thing, and it does matter, and it's also like comes with some other stuff. We gotta avoid the Western commitment to make something good or bad, or right or wrong, or up or down. It's like they do know about you over there in the other valley, brother. Like I went over there, I went a little too far in the valley, and then they said, oh, what's his name? And they let me come back, so I guess that's cool, right? And then then stuff starts happening, man. Things start going, the root of our challenge is, at least for me, is deeper than most of them. I feel people, I'll save it for later. But they get it's a when we get to this like making music and entertainment and the things that we enjoy, and which is, if I'm like, I enjoy certain stuff because of what they're talking about and the way they're talking about it, and somebody else is like, yeah, I just like the way it makes me feel, or it makes me think about, this night I had this first time I had a great time at a party, they was playing this, and so now that's my thing. Mm-hmm. Like from here on out, and it's like I don't need to, I gotta just, we just gotta wrestle, with that tension. The other thing I do want to circle back to is or a note, right, I want to make too is, I acknowledge also, like, I don't want to dress like Jim Jones, because I feel like I'm just doing other stuff. I'm not hanging out in 135th Street and wherever, you know what I'm saying, wherever he be at, you know what I'm saying, and if I was up the way, I want to make sure I'm just coming as who I am, and I wouldn't want no confusion with with the local collective, if they were like, oh man, who did brother about Justice Raji? You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, we didn't know, you came in here with the bag, with the pants a certain way. We thought you might have been on some other time. Like, nah, I ain't on none of that time. I'm actually just going to the parliament, or I'm going over there to this restaurant, or I'm with, I'm meeting one of the guys. I ain't here for nothing where you might be like, is he engaging in an old dude that's maybe engaging in stuff we would assume a young dude is up here to do? It's like, nope, not at all, actually. Look at my sneakers. These are not sneakers for somebody that is trying to ingratiate themselves. They're not bad sneakers. They may be quite stylish, but they are just like, I'm not trying to match you as a person who might be, in their early 20s, engaged in various activities, or not. You could just be a college student, brother. I ain't saying you're doing that.
That's the thing of the challenge around, at least again, my earlier perception of infantilization. Mm-hmm. And now it's just like, okay, like, is it just culture? Is it going back to this mystical, magical term of culture of like, at some point, you've seen men, they dress a certain way, they dress another way, maybe dress for their job. So I also want to be thoughtful. Maybe people dress for their job. So, but also there was a culture in the Black community if you get dressed up, or, nights that you go out and stuff like that. We've had this dialogue starting in the 80s when sportswear became, Italian sportswear in particular, became the defining thing of being dressed up. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, I understand why it was being dressed up. The sweatsuit was $300. You had to get it from Germany, right? You had to get it from Italy. So yes, it was you being dressed up. It was $300. It cost more than any suit that you was gonna get made by somebody.
It's expensive.
But so let's say that's the early 80s.
Yeah.
We've had 40 years of that, right? And so now we have 40 years of it being like, yo, he's not a kid, but he kind of dresses like a kid, but is it kind of like kid stuff anymore?
Yeah, right.
So because now it's a real debate. And listen, be the first one. When the Agassiz came back out, I went and got him. When the Sergio Check suits came out, I went and got him. So I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm better than nobody because I went and got him.
Nah, what I'm saying is in tune with that. I wear what like was cool for me when I was young, which you might think is cool too, but I'm not necessarily like running to the Nike store trying to get a tech suit.
Tech suit.
I try to get a tech suit. You go, oh man, you got the tech on.
Yeah,
y'all got that. I don't need I don't need my sweatshirt to be tight. You know what I'm saying? I got my sweatshirt might have a polar bear on it or something else, but it ain't gonna be tight. You know what I mean? But I understand why y'all, that's y'all
fascinating. Because in some ways I think the tech suit is like the white t-shirt of this generation, although they wouldn't see it like that. Because it's like it's black or it's blue or maybe it's gray.
Right.
Like, and it, in some ways it's the same kind of like white tee-esque energy.
Yeah, that's
like
our uniform.
All have it on.
Yeah, this is what we're rocking.
This uniculture, right?
Yeah.
And for us, it was a uniculture, even if it was low. Even if it was polo, it was a uniculture of sorts. It might have been a different thing, but it was uniculture, right? Like I'll say this, just transition out of that, but like, so all the kids like to wear hoodies in hot weather, and it fascinates me to no end. But today I had to have a come to justice moment because I said to myself, there were years I ran around in baggy jeans and Timberlands in 100-degree weather. Yeah. And I had to really come to grips. I thought about, there was a time I felt like it was 101 degrees and I had on fatigues and a pair of black chuckers.
That's boots on that, definitely.
And I wasn't, and so, some of this stuff obviously has to do with the nuances of late stage capitalism and, the technology going haywire and all the things we talk about all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And some of it is just being a kid.
Yeah.
The difference is the stuff we talk about being a kid now comes to you through a 50-year-old.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
We get it. And again, I listen to Jim Jones's music. When you're places, you can see the role that Jim Jones et al. Have had on culture. And so I can appreciate it. Again, I think what it gets to me is like, as hip hop thinkers, whether it's a academic or a journalist, how do we kind of get to unwrapping some of this stuff? And how do we get, and I will say this, I'm going to editorialize here. How do we get to unwrapping it in ways that are not so laden with academy terms that people don't want to give it any thought? Because what they just read is like, I'm not debating that or saying that's true or not. I just don't, you know what I mean? Like that we can actually really have a dialogue about our music and then within that, our culture.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's there's an aspect of this where it's like the concern of the gaze and like whose gaze am I having these feelings and thoughts about this for, right? Is it for my own understanding and what I enjoy? Is there these other aspects of I'm assessing its value versus with maybe people who again are differently oriented to it or differently connected? Am I am I able to just how also well do we talk about our own, stuff that it's creative product of our communities, right? Broadly defined, or places that we have affinity and connection with. And do we allow ourselves to be the owners of that conversation, right? And also acknowledging that sometimes the fun of music and just creative things that are shared is us having discussion about the thing that was said in the thing, right? Like, or done by the artist, or in the back and forth about it is an experience for us with our peers or with our community or whomever that is, right? And that piece being in and of itself it's a part of why there's all, I guess we have this proliferation of kinds of information, but I think there's sometimes an assumption or a subtext to the place of entertainment in the moment that thinks that there is this other form of the world where we're not thinking about entertainment, we're just thinking about serious stuff that we think really matters. And it's I don't know, I think we always would do both. I think there's a bigger history of we gotta feed the kids, we gotta clean up the thing, or we gotta put out the fire or whatever. And I don't know how you feel about Thriller, but Man in the Mirror, you know what I'm saying? And Michael Jackson, you know what I mean? And then now you and the person that enjoys that are going to have this dialogue about it and what it meant to you and where were you at in your life and all these other things, that those things have to be some sort of mutually exclusive engagement. There's a war, Iran, there's bombs, and it's all that stuff's happening. And we're talking about all this. We're thinking about all this stuff at the same time. The world is not separated. So, yes, in some other grand scheme of things, what's happening, with just in case anyone, distractions. We need y'all to talk about the cluster bombs that were dropped on the nuclear sites. No, you don't. There's much better informed people. I mean, I can have some thoughts, but I probably would go much more into wild speculation,
right,
than something that I could be informative or share what it means, to me, and where my life is at right now. On this topic, so just in case anybody kill me.
Can I say this before we transition?
Yeah,
one of the many perversions of podcast culture while we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, it's meta. You know what I'm saying?
Meta. Got to go there. Is this idea that you have to have a perception or a thought about everything, right? You don't have to have a thought about everything. And the idea of people being watch the distractions. It's dog, they didn't need a distraction to do what just happened. And then we'll talk about the BBB and whatever you think those three letters mean. There was no distraction needed.
Yeah.
Guess what? It was a pure power play. Another three Ps. They didn't need to distract you to do that. So sometimes we are making so much of our individual locations in the world that we're not talking about what is a collective action versus what you think about it. I don't know what everyone thought about the civil rights movement or the black power movement, and I don't know what everybody thought about apartheid. I know what people did, right? That's what I know in the world. Because I didn't have access, fortunately, we didn't have access to everybody's thoughts. So what I know is what people did. I don't know what you thought. And I think we have to be really careful around this, this centralizing thought to the point where the thought is enough.
Yeah.
And like you said, someone's limited perspective about cluster bombs did it destroy in Iran. Guess what? You don't know. So whatever you think about how the bomb went, you don't know. And you won't know. And that's not a reason to say you don't care about it. The bigger thing is, okay, here's what you think about it. So now what is your view of foreign policy? And does that go into who you vote for?
Yeah. And is the election imminent?
Right. Or are you organizing around foreign policy.
Yeah.
Because message or stitches, they say, Black people have cared about foreign policy before.
Yeah, we do.
So it's not
new right,
to actually care about foreign policy, but it's not to talk about foreign policy and then not to do nothing with it, but then I got to hear everybody talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think your point is really, really well taken, and I think the human condition is to be able to laugh and cry. It's to be able to discuss the micro and the meta. And I think, business starts to separate those things. But that just because business separates those things don't mean that we have to. So, yeah, peace.
Yeah, peace. So that, go listen to Nas, go listen to Jim Jones, go listen to some other stuff, listen to that Clips record. I heard that Slick Rick record got some stuff to it. You know what I'm saying? And I always, Slick Rick, quiet as kept. Slick Rick, good at rapping. Probably had something good to say.
Very good.
Yeah, man, and take the best part for yourself. Don't take any wooden nickels and stand up in a rowboat. You know what I'm saying? So, with that, anything else? Good at order.
Order's good. 1, 2, and 3.
So that we say, peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Oldhead podcast, or maybe it's its own podcast. Maybe it is the future and the present, wrapped and bundled in an ongoing synchronous and asynchronous manifestation of the interest and curiosity of one man, or maybe two. Who knows? In any event, you can support by searching for the podcast, rating and subscribing wherever you listen, by searching Justice Raji on Patreon and becoming a patron. Yeah, and soon, very soon, you will be able to watch video. So, yeah, take the best part for yourself and listen and share, and we really appreciate it, but more to come. So, peace.